Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. And if you haven't already seen, I've talked about this before. I'll continue to talk about this again. As a common theme for this channel specifically is the fact that I'm talking about a variety of different things in my life and different aspects and avenues that I've gone down. It's not just a creative filmmaking channel. It's not a photography channel. It's not a tutorial channel. It's really just the interest that I have in creating stories and telling stories that align with the experiences that I've had and hopefully experiences I continue to have as I move forward. So in this video, I'm acknowledging a topic that I haven't really actually talked much about. I haven't really said much on my Instagram. I haven't really said much on here, but it's talking about the fact that I decided to get out of the military, and it was a definitive decision. There was no other motives. There was no other pieces that kind of came with it besides for the fact that I was ready to part ways with the military that I had been in for 8 years. Before I get into why I decided to exit the military, I do want to talk a little bit of backstory and sort of my story of getting into the military, because as many people have a variety of different ways to entering the military and entering their experiences, there always is a different story. No matter who you think that person is or was, the fact that they enter the military was a decision that they've made in this country, and also a whole different aspect and avenue that you might not know of from that person from before they entered to where they might be within the military service. So when I was in college, I was an athlete. I was actually a diver at an NCAA Division II school called Clarion University, and I had been a competitive athlete my whole life. And the one thing that I noticed about myself when I was a competitive athlete is I was naturally really good at the sport that I was in. And most often in the environment I was in, it was very much a selfish drive to something I was already really good at. And I wasn't actually great at hard work in that process. And as I got into college, that started to change. You had to do diving practice or swim practice twice a day. There was a lot more pressure on you, but realistically I'd spent my whole childhood and whole life competing in gymnastics and or diving or both for the variety of years and as a full-time sport. And then when I got into college, I realized that hard work is challenging for me because I wasn't naturally good at pushing past into hard work. Even though I was getting really good at diving, I actually had to take a step away from that part of my life and focus on something else. Because I went to school with no purpose. I went to school with no plan of what I wanted to do besides go do diving, go be on a sports team. And halfway through school, this really started to affect me and change how I viewed what my future was gonna be because it didn't have a deliberate path. So after ending diving as a career and ending it as a sport, I decided to join the ROTC program. And that was to become an officer in the Army. And one of my first semesters there, I think I talked to one of the people that was in charge of the cadet program at the time, and I said, what's one of the hardest jobs there is? And they said, being a pilot or being in the infantry, depending on the year. And I said, I like both of those ideas. What do you think would be the hardest one to get into? What is my strongest skill set? And he said, if you want to try something challenging, you'll join the infantry. He also came from an infantry background, and I said, I want to do the hardest thing you got, so let's go do it. I had to get my act together. I had to get my grades up. I had to produce the work to show that I wanted to earn that job and that title, because it wasn't just going to be given to me. And I realized if I want to do something great, or if I want to do something adventurous, and if I want to actually have control over it, I had to work much harder than I had in the past. And so getting my act together was the first step in joining the military. And that career was an ongoing process of having to learn and develop these skill sets and working hard and understanding that nothing is going to be given to me. No matter how hard I work, it will have to always continue. Because at the very least, when you're an officer, you will be in charge of people. And if you want to have that expectation on those ones that you are working with and for, then you have to set that example as well. So that's how I started getting into the military. And when I got the job that I wanted, I went into the National Guard. I wanted to go back into grad school, and I was deployed within my first year of being in the National Guard, which was a big shock to actually a lot of people. And I was probably the youngest, newest lieutenant on deployment going to the Middle East during the height of ISIS, where there was a lot of unknowns that could have happened, even though our mission was not centric to fighting ISIS on the ground. It was a support mission in Jordan, but given the fact that we don't know what happens in the world, we didn't know where we could have landed in the future of this deployment. So I was deploying at 24 years old with no life experience yet, nothing that I can really grasp onto to train, to teach others. And the majority of my NCOs has already been into a combat zone or at least a deployment prior. And I'm walking into a new position 6 months from my job training, thinking that I'm going to have to run this gambit as best as I can, but knowing that I really am not qualified to do so. And so I learned pretty quickly that when you are in charge, you are only in charge because of that title and you haven't earned anything. And when you are in that position as a young man, you grow up really quickly because you realize mistakes that are made because other people see them. You realize that if you want to set an example, you have to be the one that does it. And I can't say I did that every time, all the time, but I can say that it taught me how to do this outside of the military, and it taught me how to better understand communication and skills that I needed to do moving forward, even within the military. And being an officer, I wanted to do more with this because I knew that it was going to be a world where it was going to get political. I knew that it was going to develop into a job that might not be in the field, on the front lines, and it was going to be plannings and operations and different types of jobs that I don't think were really fit for the kind of person that I am, with either the variety of drive I have or the skill sets or just wanting to do more. So I did a tryout for Special Forces, 20th Group out in Maryland. I did 3 drill periods with them, and I decided that as a captain, I wanted to go be a team leader on an ODA, and I wanted to go through that pipeline. Needless to say, I actually did pass the assessments they had to then go to selection in the Q course, but my personal life had derailed because of the military. And I'm not saying because of it, as it definitively was what happened to my life, but there was a lot of drawbacks that I had because of the time I'd spent away from my ex-wife at the time I'd spent away from my family and developing a personal life, developing a better career, because I had continued to put more time into the National Guard, which was not a full-time job. It's not intended to be, but in my 8 years of service, I had spent 3 years' time doing active duty work, which is a lot for most people. So when I decided to turn down the slot to go to selection and potentially be a Green Beret, I kind of had this feeling that I needed to continue to work on both parts of my life. I had loved, hated, and experienced 4 years of the military before the selection, but I didn't have a good structure at home. I had gone through a divorce. I didn't really have a good career set up. I didn't really know how to work with civilians, truth be told, in a real working capacity. So I decided to turn that down, and it ended up being for the better because I had also acquired some injuries throughout my deployment and before that with my back. So inevitably it was the right decision, although it was very hard to look back and say, maybe I should have gone down that path. But knowing what I know now and dealing with different health aspects that came from being in the infantry, I think my career would have been shot down really quickly, or I would have even passed the Q course. So now you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with getting out? And it's because going into a soft job, a special operations job like the Green Berets, is something that is extremely difficult. It's the cool, sexy part of jobs that everybody thinks is the dopest thing in the military. When push comes to shove, it's definitely the hardest job on the planet is to be a Green Beret, and it's not cut for everybody. No one's cut from that cloth. It's very, very minute amount of people that can really dig down and be an expert at that, and it takes an extreme level of commitment to be there. And because I had this drive to say, I don't have a civilian career, I don't have my civilian life together, but I'm only in the military part-time, how can I put more time in it without getting the other pieces of my life stable, the other pieces of my life and what I want to do to grow? And over time, I started working on other side projects when I decided to not go into that program and say, okay, I do want to start a business again. I do want to work on my career. I do want to have a sense of normalcy and space within my holistic view of my own life that I have. So the last thing I got to do in the military was work on these COVID operational orders and go to a bunch of facilities locally where I live in Pennsylvania and help out in hospitals, right? This was the height in 2020 to 2021. And I did this for a whole year with a great group of soldiers, and it brought me that last bit of value that I had to give to soldiers because I got to work with them again one last time. I got to be a part of the grind and the stupid that we all had to deal with. And as the person that was in charge of their group, it was a good chance to give my best output to them who are working hard for this community, and the best that I could do to deliver this, knowing that if I stay in the Army, I would not really get this opportunity again. And I wouldn't really get this influence on the ground level that I used to have. So it was one last goodbye and a good sense of purpose where we actually had a mission that I valued, that the community valued, and that was helpful during a time of need. And now stepping away from the Army became easier when I had that fulfillment, but it also became easier because I have other passions that are going to contribute to the Army in the long run. And one of these things I've really hinted at, but we're working on a business that can give back to the military in the fitness community specifically, to help soldiers that are the story that I had, where I ended up hurting myself and trying out for something that I really wanted to do. And even a year after the trout, I did say no to it, but even a year later, I couldn't physically go back and do it again because of these prior injuries, probably because I was overtraining at the time and putting my time and effort into this, programming really incorrectly. And stepping away from the Army is hard because you miss that fulfillment, you miss that brotherhood. I currently miss seeing my friends that are at drill right now, but stepping away and finding a passion that you want is the best thing that you can do for yourself if you're in the military, because a lot of people don't have that. There are a lot of soldiers that the military, whether it's full-time or part-time, really is a catalyst for them to get out of a bad situation. It is a catalyst for them to have that sense of purpose and to be proudly wearing a uniform and knowing that they get to do something fun with the boys that is challenging, that not a lot of other people get to do, or not a lot of other people are willing to do. And so that part for me is very hard to walk away from. But knowing that I have more of a purpose, and knowing that I have other parts of my life that I want to contribute to give back to the military when the time comes, has helped me be able to transition out of the military better, and having that feeling almost of guilt that a lot of people have to leave their friends that are in the service and to leave that world behind. And I think a lot of people do struggle with that are currently serving, where they say, I don't know what else I would do. I don't know how the civilian world works, or it's hard to be in the civilian world where the structure is different and it's not so straightforward in planning and preparation and what your job is. And it's so broad, it's almost intimidating. And I always encourage people that if you're serving in the military, it doesn't mean you only have to be doing that part of your life all the time. And I'm a good and a bad example of that, I would say, because there are times where I didn't focus on my job in the military and times where I did, and maybe those crossed over into times where they should have been the opposite, right? But I can say confidently that that was the only way that I could step away from the military and have a better sense of purpose, and to work on myself and have that drive to take a step away. And for me, that was one of the best ways, is to have a community that you can find, is to have things that you can do outside of what you do for your service job, because it will help you inevitably give you the leverage if you do want to end your service and go move on with your life, that you feel comfortable doing so and you're ready to do so. And that is really hard too, because we need good people in our military, and we need people that are willing to want to stay and be hard workers, but we also need people to have fulfillment. We also need people to feel mentally and physically well while they're doing their service and after their service. And that is why the company that I'm working on is supposed to be targeting the fitness community within the military to make a better soldier, but also to help them prepare mentally and physically together in hopes that they can succeed in that career, so that they can succeed in things that they want to do, and that we do have a strong leader when the time comes to help out other soldiers around them, and for other soldiers to learn from that and do the same thing and to replicate that. So I guess the point of this whole thing was that very big part of my life is still a part of the missions and the values that I have. And all the things that I had learned are things that I would never change ever in my entire life. All the good and the bad together are things that I can proudly say that I got to go through, and confidently say that none of it was a regret, even though there were some times that I wish I would have prayed for anything to be over and for it to change, but it made me a stronger, better person when it came time to doing this next phase of my life and this next journey that I'm going on, and all the things within this business and personally that I want to accomplish and get done, and be able to bring it back to that community and that core value that I have from those people that I admired, and bring something good to the table for them. If you are in that boat in the military and you're transitioning out, know that you're not alone in this complicated process where things are not so straightforward, and that it is hard to find a brotherhood and a community. It truly is. I'm still struggle with it sometimes today, where I feel as civilians, you never feel at a close-knit group like you do in the service. You really don't. but just know that you're not alone in doing so, and that there are groups and people and places that you can find that fulfillment if you're ready to leave the military, and you can still do it while you're in the military. And you might find yourself in a place where you can actually make a move in your career or outside of your career based on the things that you've started to do for yourself outside of the service, and prioritizing the ability to just show that there is more out there, and you might find things that you might not even know about yet that you're interested in. So started to wrap up this one in such a weird way, but it makes me feel better to almost acknowledge this part of my life too. And I encourage other people to do the same, but also reach out to me if you've ever wanted to discuss or connect or find groups of people to connect with, because that is an ongoing process that I'm currently trying to do myself. So you're not alone in this world. The military does not have to be your whole life, and make the best of a career that you can, because you'll look back and appreciate every part of it. But just know that you're never going to be alone in that transition in the military or that transition out of the military. You'll always have forever that community, as long as you had served and as long as you need that community's help. There are people out there that are willing to have your back as another veteran to a veteran. I'm one of those people, but go out of your way, make the most out of what you can. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I would love to hear your stories from your service as well. So thanks again, until next time. Enjoy.